light. So the red light's on. This is when it gets really stressful. So hopefully you don't have the red light syndrome where you just clamp up and just.
Please.
Cool. Well, let's start off with a quick sound check question. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I didn't. I'm an intermittent faster, so
Oh.
Coffees and teas for me only. Tea this morning, nettle tea.
Nice. Is that a regular thing, or as you just said, you're fasting right now, or?
It's a regular thing. Yeah, most days I only have my first meal at about 1 and wrap up by about 7, and then have longer extended periods of rest and digest.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like there might be some science behind that, or is that just you read it online?
I read it online, so it must be true. Yeah,
there it is.
Pleasure.
There it is. Sounded good though. It's good. It's good. You get that little rumble in there, so that's cool.
Yeah, there is some quite a bit of emerging science around it. Actually, it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Your body thinks it's dying, so it starts to repair itself and helps you live longer.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, let's jump right into it here. So why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Awesome. Well, my name is Brendon Lundberg, and I'm the founding CEO of Radiant Pain Relief Centers. And we're working to change the way that chronic pain is understood and how it's treated. In the US alone, there's 100 million people in chronic pain, which is more than cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease combined, and similar numbers exist throughout the world. And we have this huge opioid addiction epidemic that's, plaguing societies and robbing people of life and taking lives. I mean, and I don't know the 2018 numbers yet, but in 2017, 72,000 people, I think it was, died of opioid overdoses. So definitely time for a safer, better solution to this big pain problem. And we're very excited to be pioneering and bringing that to market.
That's cool. And so how are you involved in this? Like where's your background? How is this something that you're taking on right now?
Yeah, well, my background has been primarily in healthcare related business. So I'm not a clinician. My co-founder is a Harvard and MIT trained medical doctor. And prior to founding the company, I spent a few years selling this device or trying to sell this device that's central to our business model. And found that doctors didn't understand it. And in most cases, there was an economic disincentive for them to adopt it. High acquisition cost and, high opportunity cost and integration challenges and whatnot. So I just recognized kind of a unique opportunity around this therapy that is very safe and effective, and built a different business concept, which essentially is a direct-to-consumer business. And, a parallel I like to use, it, even though it's in a completely different industry, is Starbucks. And Starbucks has fundamentally shifted society. I mean, they have changed the way that we think about coffee, the way we consume coffee, how much we spend on it, the role it plays in our lives. I mean, they've shifted everything around coffee, and they didn't do it by selling a better coffee product to a local diner. They did it by creating an experience, by creating these stores. And that's our vision too. We're building clinics around some very novel technology that's safe and highly effective. No drugs, no needles, no surgery, no side effects. And rather than kind of trying to make it work inside of the frankly complicated and often fragmented and broken healthcare delivery system that we have, we're just going right to the consumer. We're building a better care model around it that allows us to deliver the therapy consistently, to build a brand, to educate, and to create a much higher level of customer experience.
That's cool. So when you talk about, and I think this applies to a lot of people who come at a very, very big idea, right? Like, this is a gigantic idea. Where are steps one for this thing to actually be manageable and attainable, when you think about how big and how, like the scale you're talking about right now? How do you focus it down to make sure that you're actually achieving smaller goals in that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think for me, it was kind of like that Steve Jobs quote, "Stay hungry and dumb." Like I was hungry, I wanted to start a business, and I was dumb, and I'm like, okay, let's do this. And the grand ambition initially was not really to become exclusive around the technology, or I don't know that I fully believed that I had an opportunity the way that we now see that we have it at the time. I just thought I had a better kind of clinical delivery model for this therapy. And but as we got into it, and as we learned, both the learning and the opportunity and the challenge all kind of coalesced into help us to see this as a bigger picture. And then, it becomes, necessity is the mother of invention. And once you get pregnant in something, like you're committed to that thing, and like we saw it worked, we saw that there was an opportunity. And now it's like, okay, how do we continue to grow this? How do we, raise money into it? And the process of raising money in particular has created some unique learning opportunities and some kind of thinking around how do we grow the company in a way that's going to become sustainable and achievable. and then there's learning in terms of, making it affordable without insurance coverage and, creating operating efficiencies. And, also, I mean, there's been learning all along the way. And for me, I guess to answer the question even more directly, for me personally, there's been a huge personal development component to becoming an entrepreneur. I think we watch Shark Tank where we kind of see these really elite level entrepreneurs up on pedestals and they're like rock stars. And we think, oh, that's fun. That's something I aspire to. And I worked, previously for 2 successful companies, Inc. Magazine, growth award-winning companies, Portland Business Journal, growth award-winning companies. I was intimately involved in the operations and growth of these companies. So I had the sense that I could do something great. But, when are you the CEO? When are you successful, right? It happens in your mind long before it happens in reality. You know what I mean? You have to kind of espouse both the struggle and the satisfaction of what it means to be in that role long before you have a bank account that reflects it, or you have a staff size that reflects it, or you have revenues that reflect it, I think.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the tech side of this thing, because that seems very intriguing. I mean, I was watching some videos and frankly, I don't really know what I was watching. So I think this is, and I always try to go into these interviews in this sort of way, because I think it's a good opportunity to sort of like, how do you describe this to somebody who right now is listening on, on a car, on a train, on whatever they're doing? Yeah. How are you describing this to somebody on the tech side of it so that they're like, wow, that seems very intriguing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's important to understand that the science of pain has changed significantly in the last 10 or so years. And it takes 15 to 20 for new science to really matriculate through the medical education system. And in the case of pain in particular, there's a lag even greater, because we have industry that's built around certain therapies, drug therapies in particular, right? Mm-hmm. So most doctors are trained in biochemistry, and everybody experiences pain. So we as individuals feel like we understand pain, and we feel pain in the tissue. We feel it in parts of the body that hurt, obviously. But all pain, we now understand, is a product of the brain. The only reason that we feel any pain is because we have a brain, not because we have a knee or a bad hip or whatever.
Right.
And pain in the short term is protective. It's there to say, hey, something's not right. Take your hand off the hot stove. You sprained your ankle. You've broken a bone. You have disease growing. Get your attention. Take action. Resolve that. Learn from it. Be safe. Stay alive. Mm. In chronic pain, however, it's no longer serving that protective or productive purpose. In fact, the brain essentially becomes wired to expect and to perpetuate the pain. So even though we feel it in the tissue, it's really a problem of the brain. But most of the therapies we've had available are addressing only the tissue. There are injections, there's surgery, there's, even massage and chiropractic, which are non-invasive, those are still addressing the tissue primarily, or they're a drug that has impacted the entire chemistry of the body and results in these side effects and risks. So with that understanding, what we do is we have novel FDA-cleared technology that essentially allows us to retrain the brain through artificial nerve impulses. We attach electrodes on the skin in healthy tissue that's near the painful area, but actually that's kind of a pointed kind of deviation from other electrical-based therapies that are out there. We attach electrodes on the skin. We transmit new information through the nervous system. The brain receives that information. It essentially interprets it as a self-message, and it begins to ease the pain response. The messaging coming out of the device is dynamic and it's changing. So that causes the brain to have to work to interpret that. And that working on behalf of the brain is what causes the brain to start to change, which is neuroplasticity. So essentially what we're doing is not just masking the pain with a different sensory experience, but we're giving the brain new information. And then over a series of consecutive treatments, typically over a few weeks, about an hour a day for two or 3 weeks, the brain is exposed to this and essentially it learns. And, through neuroplasticity, like learning how to ride a bike or how to do algebra, through that repetition and exposure, the brain adopts a new wiring essentially back to a more normal perception of pain. So we're able to achieve lasting relief for almost all types of chronic pain without drugs, needles, surgery, or side effects. No, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, no, it really is. Just on a personal level, I talk quite openly about a lot of stuff, and I think my dad has suffered from this. My wife's parents both have this chronic thing. Do you find that this is more associated with a generation, or is it a type of person, or is this something that 50 and older has dealt with this, or they have a different perception, or is it like the opioid epidemic that we talked about earlier? Is it something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, we in our clinic we see people in their, we have right now a woman in her 90s, and we have a kid that's 11 years old. So, it is I mean, it will affect everybody. There's not really like a type. I mean, anybody can be potentially subjected to pain, obviously, and then chronic pain in particular. But we now understand that pain is multifactorial. In the book, I wrote a book fairly recently along with my co-founder. And in the book, I make the analogy that we think of pain very cause and effect, like, oh, something is wrong. And in the short term, again, it's protecting us because likely something is wrong. Mm-hmm. But in chronic pain, it's not that way. And so a better analogy is to think about credit card debt. Let's say you get a brand new credit card with like a $3,000 limit, and you start using that card for routine things like gas and groceries and school supplies for the kids. It's great. You have access to this credit. And as long as you pay the bank the minimum payment every month, you can keep using it, mm-hmm. right? But if there's an event, like let's say the car breaks, you have to get a new transmission, and that transmission costs $1,700, but you only have $1,500 of available credit on the card. Metaphorically, this is a painful experience. You have a big bill. You're now at or over your limit, so there's probably over limit fees. And if you were relying upon that card to buy gas to get to work or to pay your utility bill or to put food on your table because you don't get paid maybe for another week, then the impact, the circumstance of what surrounding that event has made much greater. And we think, in this analogy, we think, oh, it's because of that car repair bill. And yes, the car repair bill was the tipping point. But if you didn't have all this other debt aggregation, you could have absorbed that bill and been just fine. Life would have continued, right? And pain works the same way. The nervous system wants to keep us alive. So it's recording all of these different events, injuries, stress, disease, environment, probably from the time of in utero. And it's recording those basically. And when we're healthy, it's like paying that debt off. You know, it can move through the system and everything is fine. But because of the lifestyles that we all live, you know, we're heavy, we eat bad food, we have stress, we don't sleep, you know, I mean, the environments that we're in, I mean, all of these things compound together to create this circumstance, much like a credit card debt. Right. And then seemingly a simple injury or event, which otherwise would just heal and go away, becomes the tipping point at which we're now, the nervous system has changed and we're over the limit of what our nervous system can endure. And now even normal sensory experience like touch or walking or sleeping or laying down, it starts to be perceived as threat, and the body interprets it as pain. And you know, we pop a pill because that's a simple thing to do, and none of us like pain. So it's like, give me the quickest fix. We pop a pill. Well, that's kind of like drinking a 6-pack of beer to deal with our credit card debt. We feel better about it in the short term, but it isn't really resolving the problem, right? And so what we do is we educate about the neuroscience of pain, the brain's involvement of pain. We empower people with this education. We treat them through our therapy so we can reduce that impact right away. And then it really starts a transformation in our clients where they go, oh my gosh, like I'm feeling so much better. I need to start eating better. I need to start exercising. I need to start addressing my sleep. I need to face some of these stressor, you know, triggers in my life, whether they're work or finances or family or whatever else. And then they start to have a big holistic improvement and they become educated about it, you know?
Sure. And is this mostly around some sort of physical pain at first, or is it something that it could be emotional? It could be a trauma that happened to you as a child or anything like that?
Well, the mechanisms in terms of what's going on in the brain are probably very similar. You know, we work specifically on physical pain, but there's almost always some interplay between some physical pain, emotional pain, stress, anxiety disorders. You know, and what was the first? What came second? Sometimes it's hard to tell. Sometimes clients don't remember, don't really know. These things kind of just emerge and then start to feed on each other. You know, so by being able to address, and you know, many times clients come in after years or decades, and they're very complicated. You know, they've had years of pain. They haven't been sleeping. They're withdrawn from their work and from their family and social circles. They're not intimate with their spouse anymore. You know, they're on a cocktail of medications and taking medications to counteract the side effects of the medications. And so when they come to us, like most doctors are like, oh my gosh, Miss Jones, like I don't know what to do. You know, good luck, live your life. And they come to us in this very kind of complicated and fairly broken state, and we're able to address the pain component of that in such an effective way that it just simplifies their whole circumstance very quickly. And it becomes a kind of a cascade of reversal in terms of like now they're back on a train of, you know, empowerment and improvement and all that.
Sure. So, you know, you used a great analogy with the credit card debt. Is that something that you find in the sort of the marketing of this, that you have to continue to find analogies to get people to kind of simplify this in their brains for them to make this choice and to get into what you're working on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, that's one of the challenges is we are, you know, again, clinicians are trained in science from the 1960s, so they're lagging behind too. So it really is a matter of education, and education precedes our ability to really create value for somebody, because if they don't know what it is, we're not going to be able to, no matter how good it is or how cheap it is or whatever, we can't offer that value. So education precedes that. And so, we're building clinics. And even if I had, all the money in the world, that process of building clinics takes time, to build the space and to hire the people and all that kind of stuff. So we wrote a book, my partner and I, as I mentioned, basically to kind of be the point of the spear and kind of get into the market and start educating people. And while we can't build those clinics overnight, we can enter this conversation, which is so urgent and so necessary. And that's why we wrote the book. It became an Amazon bestseller in the first week, and Inc. magazine called it a manifesto and an epic example of how to create a movement. And that's our goal, is to create a movement. And so we're actually beginning a big campaign to give the book away. You pay $7 to cover shipping and handling. We'll give you a free copy. You can get educated about what we do. If you like it, you can get involved as a client, as a potential clinical partner, because we're not going to sell the devices. We're going to create partnerships with clinicians in a market, so that it's a passive involvement for them. They keep doing what they're experts in and day out, but they can help us. And then we're raising money through the crowd. And so then anybody who says, wow, this is exciting, I'd like to be part of helping to frame the future of chronic pain management, I can invest $500 or $5,000 or whatever amount is appropriate for them. And then we capitalize the company simultaneously to educating and creating, value in the market.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So where are you guys then right now in terms of clinics and stuff? What does a sort of a launch plan look like? Is it something you focus on the West Coast and you're moving out, or is it certain areas that you've kind of pinpointed, like, I think people will get it here, or how do you guys approach that?
Well, we're headquartered in Portland, Oregon, which is a beautiful city, but it's perceived by many to be kind of a weird place, which it is. In fact, there's a motto, there's bumper stickers all over that say "Keep Portland Weird." And so, I've had investors tell me, well, this works in Portland, but will it work in Dallas, Texas, or Kalamazoo, or Florida? And it will. I mean, it's a very effective therapy. It's very appealing to those who need it, and there's a lot of people out there who need it. So I'm very confident it's going to work everywhere. We've raised a couple $1 million privately. We're raising just a bit more privately as well. And then we filed with the SEC back in September to begin this Regulation A+ crowdfunded mechanism. Because the government is currently shut down, that's a little bit pending, but hopefully in the next 30 days, it's open and we get approved pretty quickly. And then, we begin this campaign really in earnest. We're going to be opening probably in the next 90 days a center in Boston. And that's due to some local interest that we have there. LA, Florida, Texas, or Arizona are probably all on the short list. And then just as rapidly as we can. It's going to be a factor of, clinical partnerships, because as I mentioned, we're not selling the device to the doctor and saying, good luck, figure out how to do it.
Right.
We're selling an opportunity to invest in a local center, have participation in that passively. And so as the interest from that grows, that will help us kind of frame. Once we have 10 to 20 places that are kind of earmarked and identified, but, we'll go where the opportunity is most immediately. And part of that is the capital that allows that to happen more quickly. Yeah.
So in an idea like this, what sort of keeps you up at night? What's something that, like, you think is I'm sure there's a gazillion things that you could think of, but, like, what is one thing though that you're like, this is our biggest hurdle in a project like this?
Well, one of the biggest challenges I've had is that, I made this analogy earlier, but we got pregnant in this business model that was working clinically. It was working from a revenue generation standpoint, but we've had basically a pilot operation. So our business model is to have 4 devices in one center, because you can fix a cost structure around that, but you can create enough volume of throughput and revenue that you can create a substantial business. Due to some challenges with the manufacturing and a previous licensee and some lawsuit stuff that aren't need to necessarily get into, we've only had access to 3 devices. So I've been, again, pregnant with a business that has a cash requirement in terms of payroll obligations and wanting to grow and to start marketing and messaging a little bit and preparing to be able to grow once this lawsuit was kind of cleaned up. That it's required that I continually raise money essentially just to burn. And that's a difficult spot to be in. Right. And so that's probably been the single most frustrating thing. But at the same time, what it's done is it's proven to me personally, again, personal development has proven to me that I'm serious about this, that we're going to do it when it's hard and we're going to do it when it becomes easier, because we know it's the thing to do. Right. It's proven to our investors. And, when you're in a place where every dollar counts and you have again, necessity is a mother of invention. And so when you're really constrained, that's when you have to become very creative. If it's easy and like cash is just flowing, like you don't really think about stuff, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
I really feel fortunate that we've had a few years of struggle and learning and, having to figure some things out, because that's going to allow us to grow that much faster, I think, going forward.
So I think for any entrepreneur, we don't have to obviously get into the details on stuff, but you touched on the stuff like the ups and downs of this stuff, lawsuits or whatever it might be. How is it for you on a personal level that you just kind of keep maybe the horse blinders on for sometimes, or whatever it is, you just have stayed focused and you're just fighting through this stuff? Are there techniques that you do? Are there journaling or whatever it might be that just allows you to sort of stay focused on what you're working on and not let some of these other things just be distractions and because the idea is good? Like, what do you do on that?
Yeah. In the end of 2016, throughout 2017 and 18, I really started to invest heavily in my own personal development. I joined masterminds. I was already interested into that kind of stuff, but I started reading more books. Mm-hmm. I really tried to expand my circle of influence in terms of people that were thinking this way. I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with Brendon Lundberg, but I attended his High Performance Academy. And subsequently, now we send all of our employees through his HPA. I joined his mastermind. I became a certified high performance coach through him. And there's other great people out there. I'm not trying to endorse just Brendon necessarily, but he's we got the same name. And he's actually used to live in Portland. He just moved to Puerto Rico, and he's a really great guy. And what that did for me, a couple things is like, with that coaching, that insight, it's like when things are hard, you kind of go, oh man, like this, why me? Like that's the natural feeling. It's like, why is this so hard? Or why is this taking so long? Or why can't I control this the way I want to control it? Versus when you can realize like the struggle is part of the journey, and the struggle is really like how you become better in the journey. So one of his catchphrases is to honor the struggle. And so, when I'm feeling that way, I try to shift it and instead of saying like, oh, why me? I have to start tell myself, and it's become much more of a habit. I mean, I don't really think consciously like this anymore, but it just happens where it's like how fortunate I am that I get to be, that the universe or God or whatever circumstance, whatever it is, chose me to be the guy that gets to pioneer this therapy that's going to hopefully impact millions of people for the better, And so it's a mindset thing. And again, I think, success happens in the mind far before it happens in the tangible reality world. And the battle of emotion, the battle of discouragement happens in the mind. And then you've got to take action. I mean, at every step of the way. And, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback and look back over a year and go, oh, I would have spent money differently this way, or conserved, or we should have done that. You know what I mean? That's what you do. But at the same time, I can say with confidence that at every point in the business, I tried to make the decision not based upon what was the most comfortable, but what was going to be the thing that was going to put action, that was going to make atoms bounce against each other and create some sort of movement, because it's only in that results happen. Apologize, I thought I had everything off. I didn't really.
See, there's always one. Even if you focus on it, you try. There's always one.
Sorry about that, but I mean, I think you got to take action, because everybody has great ideas. You know what I mean? It's like there is no perfect circumstance or timing or amount of money or whatever that's going to make it easy for anything good to happen. Like you got to just put yourself in the game and take action.
And I think you just touched on it. That's a huge one for I think a lot of entrepreneurs that just start getting into it. They just if only I had this, if only I had this, if I had this, and it's like you're never in the moment of just going, well, why can't you still be successful without XYZ? It's why I love crowdfunding so much, because it proves viability. It proves, man, if you can't sell 500 units, you think you're going to you're going to change the world, but you can't sell 500 of them or whatever it is. And that's a lot inside of reward-based crowdfunding. I just love proving minimum viability, because then you can start talking about the bigger dream. So let's pivot over a little bit to, what's the conversations and the narrative around doing an equity crowdfunding raise? Why doing that instead of going traditional investment, and what kind of the mindset is and the decision-making behind that?
Yeah. Well, again, I think necessity is a key driver on this. I mean, I started raising money in 2015. I can't remember now actually, but I've had different iterations. It's like, you start kind of talking to local people that you get their feedback, what works, what doesn't work. I mean, we had a unique situation in which we had the opportunity to buy the former licensee for this technology, which is a public company, an over-the-counter traded public company. And that's not something that I personally had experience with, but some people that I have relationships with have done this many times. And so, through a series of serendipitous little relationships, we put $10 million of capital together to buy a public company, to do a reverse merger. They rejected that proposal, which frankly would have benefited them and would have put us further down the path, but they rejected it. And so now it's like, okay, raise money. So I keep raising money locally, but that's a slow process. So then you start talking to VCs, or you try to, the process of trying to get in front of VCs or larger angel groups is not easy to do necessarily. And then it's just a matter of getting your face bashed in, because they're like, oh, well, it's a great idea. We wish you the best. No offense, but we'll never invest in it because checkbox. It's like, it's very formulaic for them. And we're building brick and mortar businesses, which in today's world, people like software because it scales without the human component. We don't own the IP. We just have a licensing arrangement for it. So there's like tactical reasons why they won't invest, regardless of whether or not it's a viable company or they like it or whatever. So because of that, we've been left raising money from angel investors. And, we've raised, a couple $1 million one-on-one, $25,000 to $50,000 a pop. And it's just a slow grind. But it proved that the individual doesn't have the same check boxes like an institutional investor does. The individual says, can I get a return on my capital? Is there a path to do that? Do I like the team? And do I feel good about it? Like, is my money going to go into the world and make a difference for somebody?
Sure.
And, and so essentially, even though it's been through accredited angel investors that we've raised our $2 million, it has been kind of crowdfunding up to this point anyway.
Yep. Right.
And so we're like, well, why not just accelerate that? And with this Reg A Plus mechanism, it's a perfect mechanism to do it, really. And, we can raise up to 50 million in a year, which is a ton. We don't need nearly that much. Our goal is 15. But the point is, like, you get into the market and you educate and you create fans, you create interest simultaneously to solving the problem that you need with capital. And now you've raised money with people for whom this is a relevant problem, and will probably be customers, refer people. And, I think it's a very, very exciting time to be raising money, actually, once we understand these. I think the rub for a lot of people is, you're not to be a publicly traded company on an exchange through the Reg A Plus mechanism. It's really hard to create a substantial market, to create market makers, to draw in the institutional investors that will make a publicly traded company long-term viable. So you see a lot of companies that do Reg A Pluses, they raise a lot of money, they list on an exchange, and then the stock price just falls out because they haven't really made a market. So we've been trying to analyze that and think about how do we approach that in a way. And we feel like we have a pretty good game plan, but time will tell.
That's cool. How about in terms of just like a general sort of marketing awareness for what's coming, just on the crowdfunding side? Is that something that because I'm sure there's an education process attached to this, outside of educating them just on what you do, but how are you sort of getting people ready so that when you go to launch, obviously it's successful?
Yeah. Well, quite a few things. Again, the book will be kind of a key anchor to the marketing campaigns that we do give the book away. Digital advertising through Facebook, and Google, is pretty easy. There's a lot of people that are searching these words. Well, that makes it also expensive. So you kind of got to be clear with it. How do you position that? And the other thing that we're really trying to do is become sophisticated in our funnel building, so that when we create some value, we give the book away or whatever, we're getting emails, we're getting names, and then it's not one touch and done. It's an opportunity for us to add value, to educate, to give some client testimonials, and hopefully, over the series of that education, win hearts and minds.
Right. So for somebody thinking about, going down the rabbit hole that you're going down, are there any sort of internal metrics that you're kind of thinking of or you're looking at before you go to launch? Like, hey, we want X amount of emails, or we hope to have this many impressions. Is there just anything internally that you're looking at that somebody else would take take that information and use?
I couldn't tell you that I had that right now. I mean, and maybe our marketing consultants are looking more specifically at those key metrics like that. And I assume that they probably are. For me, it's more, for me personally, it's more like if I detach an expectation to it and I just say, like, we're going to do this. And if it takes 6 months or if it takes 3 years to get to our goal, it is what it is. You know what I mean? I can't control that anymore. All I can control is do the best we can, learn from it, pivot, keep going, learn.
Right.
keep going. So for me, I haven't necessarily done that, and maybe that's a fault of mine that you just brought here. I don't know.
You just never know. I mean, some people tie, success to certain things, or they're looking for something. So I think what you're saying is actually, there's a lot of value in that too, where is that your best use of your time maybe right now, to just looking at numbers? Yeah. Oh, we did X amount of impressions today, or, we did this, and then all of a sudden you're tied into like a Facebook number, as opposed to like, no, I don't know, we had this many people come through, or this is the actual tangible thing that happened. Because as the guy who's inside of Facebook ads all day, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm getting lied to from Facebook half the time. I got like 1,200 clicks today. Nothing happened. So,
I will say this, it's worth investing in the people that really know this mechanism, because it's a science and a process that the average person can't dabble in. And I mean, I've tried to run ads, and boost posts and things like that. And pain is considered a discriminatory language because it falls into their language policies. And so it gets rejected most of the time. And then, unless you really know what you're doing, it's really hard to make impact. And if you don't make impact, then you think it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money. And so I've had those circumstances where I boosted something, it's got a few likes or whatever, but it didn't really translate into new clients or whatever. And so then I go, well, let me pivot back into something else, like radio advertising, and that's more costly. And then I look foolish because I spent too much money in radio ads that aren't really doing much better. So yeah, hiring the right people really makes a difference. And I think, take a lot of word of mouth referrals, because there's a lot of people out there that say they can do stuff, but
Yeah. Oh, definitely. That's out there. We deal with that quite a bit. So you mentioned like team, like what kind of team are you looking at? Like how have you built this team around you? Are there things you were looking for, attributes? What were you trying to, as you're building this team around you, what were you looking for in people?
Well, I co-founded the company with a medical partner, again, a Harvard and MIT trained physician. And so I felt like I could take the bulk of, and have taken the bulk of, the business side of things. He was there to help vet the technology and be the medical ambassador and help create the clinical protocols for what we do. And then as we've grown, I've had a part-time CFO and bookkeeper. And as we've grown, I feel really fortunate that, I've never been in a position to have a big payroll to be able to go hire top talent. But fortunately, some people have found me, and maybe they've had an exit in a business already. They've come to us oftentimes as an investor. They say, I really like what you're doing. And then as we've gotten, to know each other, and they're going through their due diligence, it's like, well, and so for example, we have a new CFO who's phenomenal. We have a new COO who's incredible. And both of these guys are investors as well. And they're working for, minimal income right now because they see the long-term opportunity. Yeah, that's great. And it's been great. And then, and that's, like attracts like. So once you start getting a few of these, then it's like, who else do you know? And like, it starts to kind of snowball and build. Again, crowdfunding, crowd building, essentially, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, where can people just dive into your world and learn more? How can people kind of get in, watch videos, read books, whatever it is? How do people find you and get into what you're working on?
Yeah, the simplest website is RadiantRelief.com. Again, the company is called Radiant Pain Relief Centers. But if you go to RadiantRelief.com, that's just basically a landing page. You can sign up there and tell us that you or somebody has pain, you're a clinician, you're interested in the Reg A Plus, you're interested in the book, whatever it might be, just check the boxes and you'll get put into the appropriate funnel. So RadiantRelief.com. Or if you are a pain sufferer, check out RadiantPainRelief.com, which is our main patient site and our client site. And we'd love to try to help you. The first treatment is free. I mean, we create a very low barrier for people to come in. And even though we're only in Portland, we have literally people flying to us from across the country, from Canada, Mexico. A couple from Europe have come in over the years. And, when you're in pain and your life has been really robbed because of that pain, it robs not only how you feel, but how you feel is the filter upon which you filter everything. So it robs you of everything. It robs you of productivity and joy and connection and, function. And, to see people get their lives restored back is a beautiful thing to be a part of.
I'm sure. Yeah. It's gotta be just an amazing thing to see somebody, just get their life back, and just start owning it again. So that's awesome. And when do you guys think, I know with the shutdown, but do you guys have a sort of a timeline in your mind that this is going to, the campaign's going to be launching and stuff that people can be looking out for it?
Well, we are taking reservations right now. So it's, we can't, we can't take investment dollars, but we can take reservations. So if you go to those sites and you indicate, hey, I'm interested in the investment opportunity, you'll be put in queue as a potential investor. And then once it's approved, that'll be pushed out and you'll be notified that, hey, we're live. We don't know. We have our guy at the SEC that's assigned to our account has been pretty helpful. And he's actually called our law firm twice, even while they've been on hiatus. So they've been on furlough. He's gone in and without pay, it's kind of kept us abreast. And one thing that's hopefully a window of hope is that because the shutdown is closed the SEC, there hasn't been a lot of other submissions apparently coming in. Right. So the workload isn't really piling up too high. So once they are back in operations, then hopefully it's a pretty quick process. We submitted back in September of 18. So we do feel like it's very close to get approved and we'll be off to the races.
That's awesome.
Hopefully by the end of Q1.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Brendon, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. This was awesome. This was a great conversation. And I think my listeners are going to be totally into this and a lot of stuff to unpack here. And I wish you a lot of luck and success in the future.
Thank you, brother. It's been a lot of fun. Appreciate the time.
No problem, man. All right. Thanks.
Yep.